Good evening. Welcome to our today's session. I'm Arya Mukherjee. I'm thanking you for being present here. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the eminent speaker of this evening, who is going to discuss about in line with lining up. The eminent speaker of this unique topic is Dr. Chandrani Basu. She is the great granddaughter of renowned scientist Sri Satyan Bose. She is doctorate in Pune mathematics from University of Calcutta. She has worked in several colleges in and outside West Bengal in various academic and administrative capacities. She is faculty of Gokhale Memorial Girls College, Kolkata, Krishnanagar Government College, Institute of Education for Women, Chandannagar, Victoria Institute College, Kolkata, Ferguson College, Pune. She is associated professor at Vishwakarma Institute of Technology, Pune, postdoctoral fellow under Women Scientist Scheme of Department of India at South Asian University, New Delhi, visiting faculty at South Asian University, New Delhi. She has more than 20 research papers published in international and national journals and presented papers in international and national conferences. She is a co-author of course book on differential and integral calculus. She is a life member of professional bodies like Calcutta Mathematical Society, Indian Mathematical Society, Indian Society for Technical Education, reviewer of journals of American Mathematical Society and Indian Mathematical Society. She has completed the Wipro sponsored Mission X 10X certification and high impact teaching skills by Del Carnegie and Associates Inc. and Wipro. Qualified level 3 of the Japanese language proficiency test jointly administered by the Japan Foundation and Association of International Education Japan. Co-authored co-author of Bengali Memoir collection, Elating Billeting. She is inquisitive in nature, currently involved in pursuit of higher purpose of life as active members of Jigashu Group. Now I request Dr. Chandrani Basu, ma'am, please start your deliberation.
Good evening, all. Am I audible?
Yes, audible.
Thank you. I hope my screen is visible. Uh, can you see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Here.
Okay. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Deva Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. My humble pranams to revered Maharaj, my teachers, eminent educationists, my family and friends, and dear listeners. First and foremost, my sincerest thanks to Modak Trainer Academy, Mr. Modak and Gargidi for giving me this opportunity to reflect on some day-to-day incidents in front of this August gathering. The title of my presentation is In Line with Lining Up. Let me share one incident with you all. Last week, I was traveling to Kolkata from Mumbai by evening 8:30 flight. The captain announced that the boarding is complete and we are waiting for the signal from the control room at around 8:23 p.m. And then we just waited. At 8:45, again the captain announced that we are expected to start our journey after another 15 minutes, since there are 8 more aircrafts waiting ahead of us. And then exactly at 9, fortunately, the aircraft started moving. But we were wondering whether we are riding an aircraft or actually a bullock cart. Because after every 200 meters, the craft come to an halt. And finally, after 1 hour of the scheduled departure, at 9:30, finally, we were able to be airborne. So this is a very common scenario. And many of us have experienced such situation that for no fault of us, we have to wait. And sometimes we even miss the connecting flights and many important professional or personal appointments and engagements. The similar situation also occurs while we are visiting doctors' clinics. So there is always a long queue, and even after taking an appointment, probably prior to 2-3 months, we have to wait, and reaching there quite in time, we have to wait there. So there are various reasons for this wait. Like maybe this person has taken the appointment 2 months back and he is the first one to see the doctor, but suddenly some emergency case has occurred. So definitely this emergency patient, doctor will treat this emergency patient first, and this fellow has to wait for his turn to come. This is the situation everywhere, whether it is indoor or outdoor. All of us have experienced this situation, whether we are visiting malls or shopping the supermarkets, or we are waiting for the buses or trains. So there is always a queue, long queue, and we have to wait for our turn to get the service, right? So this is whether it is we are waiting for a manual job, manual service, or we are waiting for an automated service. The situation is everywhere the same. We have to wait on a long queue. Now, this waiting on this long queue, most of the time, it makes us impatient, and everyone is asking for the first priority in getting the service. So this lead to a chaos actually, and instead of getting the service in time, we are actually getting some delay and the total chaos. Now the current generation, they actually prefer to get the service from the comfort of their home by just clicking a mouse or touching their phone. They are going online. But we have this experience that when more number of people are applying for applying for the some particular job, or filling up some online application, or waiting or writing, appearing for some online exams, the anxious students waiting for their results to come. So most of the time the server actually breaks down. We get this type of messages that there is a error in the server. With the server, we have to try a few times afterwards, or there is some runtime error, and everywhere there is this disaster. Now, what is the reason for this waiting for getting the service? Because we are all waiting for some services to be rendered. Okay, so what is the reason for this waiting, and what is the reason for this delay in service? First and foremost, there is always a more demand for service than the available facilities for service. And so why this demand is more? Because there is always a shortage of available servers. Now, there are few reasons for this shortage. First of all, for providing more number of service provider servers, we need the more space, more it will be, if we appoint more number of personnels, we have to pay for their salary. So there will be some cost on the part of the service provider. So this infeasibility of the economy or the limitation of the space, so these are the cause of this waiting. Now, definitely when the customers are reluctant to wait for long for getting the service. And the on the part of the server, they are always looking at how with the minimal cost they can give a service to the customers. So for this, that detailed study is needed. What we have to study. So how many servers are to be made available? How long the customers need to wait in the system? And how many customers will be there to form a queue? Because if there are more customers waiting in the queue, the service provider will have to arrange for the waiting room, maybe some seats in the waiting room, and some refreshments, water, etc. So these are the things that we need to focus on, and we have to optimize the situation on the part of the waiting of the customers and the cost or the providing the service in part of the service provider. Now, these questions actually gives rise to something which is known as the queuing theory. So, what is queuing theory? Queuing theory is the mathematical study of waiting lines, and it actually concerns with the statistical description of the behavior of the queue. So Danish a mathematician come statistician come engineer A.K. Erlang, who was also the head of technical laboratory at the Copenhagen Telephone Company, he first introduced this queuing theory in studying the situation of the telephone company for improvement of companies association by analyzing telephone circuits and operators to provide an acceptable level of service. In his 1920 paper, the title of the paper is Telephone Waiting Times. He first gave some queuing model, first mathematical model on this queuing theory, and it is considered as the foundation of the applied queuing theory. And in his honor, the international unit of telephone traffic is known as Erlang. Now let us study this queuing system in a deeper manner. So this queuing system is also known as the birth-death process. What is the queuing system? So queuing system means some customers are arriving into or entering the system to get some service. So arrival is the most important characteristic of the queuing system. So we can make the analogy of the our human life. So whenever a child is taking birth, we can say that the arrival has occurred. So now over the effective period of the time, the customer is waiting for getting some services provided by the service provider, and after getting the service, he has to quit the system to make room for the new customers to enter the system. So likewise, a child, what sort of service he is asking? So first and foremost, he is asking for food, then care, love, then education, and that money, and many things. So emotional and physical, for his emotional and physical existence. So for that, what are the servers there? So the servers are immediate family, the parents, the family, friends, teachers, and society as a whole. They act as the server. And after the effective life, he with the living of the person, we are getting the departure. So this queuing system, it is consists of these three main characteristics. First is customers arriving for service. Second is after getting the service, customer has to leave the system. So this departure is very, very important. So we cannot expect that after the service is over, maybe we are meeting somebody, some old acquaintances, and we are chatting there. So that is not expected. We have to leave the system. We have to make room for the new customers to enter. And if that service is not immediate, if when the customer is entering the system, if there is already some other waiting customers, then he has to wait for the service if it is not immediate. Now here we see that there are 6 main characteristics or basic characteristics of this queuing process. What are the 6 characteristics? So first and foremost, as we have seen, that it is the arrival pattern of the customers. So there is a set of, we call it the calling population. So there is a set which is known as the calling population. That what is that calling population? So it is the set from which the customers are arriving into the system to get the service. So first is, so how this arrival is occurring. So that is known as the arrival pattern of the customer, and the average arrival or the arrival rate is denoted by the Greek letter lambda. Now after arrival, the main objective is to get the service. So this service pattern, that is the second most important thing, which is the getting of the service and departing the system after getting the service. So that is the second characteristic. Third one is how many servers are available for the service. Fourth, we have this queue discipline, or through which rule this service is made available. Fifth is what is the capacity of the system. That means how many customers can enter the system. That is the system capacity. And last one is what is the size of the calling population. Now for this waiting period, we have that two aspects are there. One is how many customers are waiting or making the line or making the queue for getting service. So that is denoted by the letter capital L. And on an average, how much time he has to wait in the queue. So that is the waiting time in the queue. That is denoted by W. And the average service time, it is denoted by the Greek symbol mu. So these are the 6 characteristics. Let us just look at these 6 characteristics in detail. First is the arrival pattern of the customers. So what is the arrival pattern or how it is measured? The arrival pattern is measured by the average number of arrival per unit time, or what is the average time between 2 consecutive arrivals. Now, it may happen that more than one arrival occurs simultaneously. Like if we consider, say, the packaged foods, so there is always a batch number. So maybe at a time, 100 packets of potato chips are produced and enters the shop. So there are, for all packaged products, there are these batch numbers. So these are generating batch arrival, or we call it as bulk arrival. Now, depending on the nature of the customers while entering the system, not after entering, before getting the service, while entering the system, depending on the reaction, there are some categories. So first is the bulking of the customer. That is, the customer decides not to enter the queue. Looking at the queue, he decides not to enter the queue. And a very this with the bulking, there is another thing which is very associated with this bulking is reneging, which is that customer first leaves the queue, but he decides to leave the queue because of impatience even before getting the service. So here, some customer is coming. So we can consider that some person is going to some saloon for a haircut. So after looking at the waiting customers within the parlor or within the saloon, he decides that for that day he will not have the haircut and he leaves the system. He is not entering the queue. So that is the bulking. And sometimes some customers are actually waiting the system and he is waiting there for a quite long time and become impatient. And even before getting the service, he is leaving the system. So this is known as reneging. Next is we are getting jockeying. So there are always some impatient customers who are actually running or jumping between two lines. This situation is very often seen in highly means loaded roads or heavy traffics. Whenever there is heavy traffic, so one particular line is moving first, so some car is shifting there, then suddenly the other line is moving, so the car is shifting between the changing the lines very often. So that is known as the jockeying. This is the switching from one queue to another. This also occurs in some students. They also have this tendency. They are actually keeping two places. They are asking in both the lines, they are saying that I am after you or I am before you, and they are actually changing the line. So this is known as the jockeying of the arriving customers. Then we have some priority arrival. Priority arrival, this also we know, say some older persons are coming into the system, or in the buses or in public transport, say there are some seats reserved for women or children or differently abled or elderly people. So they are getting the priority for this, getting the service before the others. That is the priority arrival. And there is another type of arrival which is known as the stationary arrival. So maybe every day in a very small railway station, every day at 12 noon, one particular train is coming. So whether it is a Monday or a Tuesday or a Sunday, that there will be only one train running or coming into that station, and that is fixed for that particular time. So that is a stationary arrival pattern which is not independent of the time. Now, next we are getting the service pattern. So service pattern means service mechanism of the server, how the server is providing the service. So again, just like the arrival pattern, the service pattern also be considered in two ways. First is that per unit time, how many customers are being served, or what is the average time required to serve one particular customer. Very much associated with this service pattern is the number of servers. So how many servers are there, whether the system has only one server or there are more than one server. Depending on the number of servers, the service mechanisms can be categorized into following types. So first is whether the servers are put into parallel with one another. Like when we are going into for this That supermarket, there are more than one cash counters. So they are actually parallel servers. Similarly, there can be the servers can be joined in serial, and the customer has to go through a series of servers before completion of the service. And there could be the combination of these parallel and series servers. So diagrammatically, we can show it like there is a single channel and there is a single server. So single channel, single phase. So all the customers are making a single queue, and from there, they are getting the service one after another and leaving the system. Second is there is a single channel, but there are more than, say, two servers which are joined in series. Like when we are visiting a doctor's clinic, first we have to go and write down our names, and then when our turn comes, we have to go for the getting the checkup. So there are two servers. First is the reception and then the doctor's chamber. So these two servers are joined in series, and any customer has to go through these two channels separately to get the total service, finish the service, getting the service. Then, as I mentioned, that there could be multiple channel but single phase. So that customers are going to the supermarket. So there are several cash counters. So they can go to any cash counter whichever is free. The first waiting customer in the queue can go to any cash counter which is free for that time and get the service and leave the system. And this multiple channel, multiple phase, so there are parallel servers which are joined in series. Like when we go for the in the airport, so again first we have to go for the check-in counter to deposit our luggages. So there are more than one counters which are in parallel. Whichever is free, the customers can go there. After that, after depositing the bags, then they are going for the security check. So in the security check, again, there are more than one channels. So they can get to any of the channels available and get the security checking done and proceed for the next step. So this is the service mechanism. Next comes the queue discipline, in which manner the customers are selected for service. Okay, so very basic is the first in, first out, or first come, first served basis. Okay, so this is quite natural that whoever is coming into the system first will get the service first. So if this girl is coming to the slide first, she will get the opportunity to write the slide before the other friends. So this is first in, first out, or first come, first served basis. Likewise, we have last in, first out, or last come but first out. This occurs when, say, in the production line, when the products are stacked in one upon another, so it is very difficult to get the first one out. So it is always the last one which is at the top of the stack. It is taken out at the first. So it is last in but first out. Then, as I mentioned, there are priority in selection for elderly, for women, children. They have the priority in many situations for getting the service done. Then we have selection in random order. Like from the pack of 52 cards, we have to select any one card. So this happens when there is some quality check in the factories. So there are different products, and at random some product is selected for the quality check. So this is selection in random order. Then we are having this capacity of the system. How many customers are allowed into the system, because there are sometimes physical limitation to the amount of waiting room. So when the line reaches that certain length, when the line reaches that limitation of the waiting room, no further customers are allowed to enter until the space become available for the next customer to enter. And here, definitely, if the capacity, we call it as the finite capacity queuing system. And that a queue with the limited waiting room is forcing the customers who are arriving after the limit is reached to for the bulking. So here we are getting a forced bulking if the arrival occurs when the queue size is at its limit. So as an example, we can consider this van which only allowed the sitting passengers. So here we see that there are only 8 seats available, and already there are 4 customers or 4 passengers occupying 4 seats. So only 4 more seats are available for the newly coming passengers. Here we see that only 3 passengers are waiting. Now, the next one more passenger can enter the bus, and the 5th passenger, even if he comes, he has to leave the system. He cannot enter this van. So there is for the 5th passenger, there is a forced bulking. So this is a limited capacity of the queue, finite. We call it a finite queue. And there could be infinite queue, like the total number of phone calls received received in a customer care center. There is no limit for that number of phone calls. If we consider the total number of searches in a Google search engine, there is no limit of that number of searches. So those are examples of infinite capacity queuing system. Now, what is the size of the population? So the population of the potential customers generates a set which is called the calling population. Now, this calling population can be either finite or it can be infinite. The system having the large calling population is considered as the infinite calling population. There in some factories, once the machine is in operating condition, we cannot stop the machine. So some machines are on 24/7. So products are continuously coming. So and now say we have to box those products. So in the assembly line, the box are so infinitely number of these boxes which are waiting to be packed. So how many such boxes can be there? There is no limit. So here it is a example for the infinite calling population. Another example, we can see that here we are observing that the 1983 Cricket World Cup winning Indian team is shaking hand with the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi. We know that there was only 15 players. So there cannot be more than 15 players waiting or shaking hand with the Prime Minister. So this is the example of the finite population, because the population itself is finite. So that definitely it will ensure a finite queue. Now, after considering the characteristics of the queue, we need to know how can we denote the queue mathematically or symbolically. Because for analyzing any system mathematically, we need some symbols or notations. Now, in this queuing system, since there are 6 basic characteristics or most important characteristics of the system, this notation which is representing the queue, has these 6 symbols or 6 alphabets. And this notation is known as the Kendall's notation. So Kendall's notation, it is denoted by A stroke B stroke C colon D stroke E stroke K. Now what is A, B, C, D, E, K? As mentioned, first and foremost, the most important thing in the queuing system is the arrival of the customers, right? So first, this A denotes what is the arrival pattern of the customers. In statistical language or mathematical language, we call it the type of distribution of the number of arrivals per unit time or the inter-arrival time, that is the time between 2 consecutive arrivals. Similarly, next is after arrival, the main aim is to get the service. So this B denotes the type of distribution of the service time. Next is how many servers are available for service. So that is the number. C denotes the number of parallel servers. Then D denotes the capacity of the queuing system. So D denotes the capacity of the queuing system. Like we have seen that the system can have finite capacity or infinite capacity. E is the queue discipline, in following which rule the service is made available, and K is the size of the calling population. Now, if there is no ambiguity between this capacity of the system or the queue discipline or the size of the calling population, that maybe there is this first come first serve basis, the service is provided, and the system can have infinite capacity, and definitely the calling population is also infinite. In that case, the last 3 notations are omitted from the Kendall's notation. So the system is represented only by the first 3 notations. Okay. So as an example, we consider maybe the passengers boarding in an aircraft. So there is only one gate, and that the passengers first is, so this first symbol is denoting the arrival pattern. So arrival pattern means, so if the number of pattern is in the or the inter-arrival time of one passenger is independent of the arrival of the other passengers, then we statistically we have a standard distribution. So when we are considering the number of arrivals per unit time, it is known as it follows Poisson distribution. And if we are considering the inter-arrival time between 2 consecutive arrival, it follows the exponential distribution. So this in such situation, we are getting which is called as the Markovian process. So it is a standard process. So instead of denoting it by that Poisson or exponential distribution, we just denote it by M. So M means it is a Markov process. That means the arrivals are independent of each other. Similarly, that if the service time is also independent of the service time of the other passengers, it again follows the Markovian process. So this is also M. And if there is just one gate through which the passengers can enter the craft, so the number of server is equal to 1. Maybe the aircraft has only 200 seats, so the capacity of the system is 200. So whoever comes first get to enter the aircraft first. So it is first in first out basis. And who can enter the craft? So there is no restriction on who can get the ticket and enter the craft. So the calling population is infinite. Another situation here, we see that 4 executives are providing some customer support. So here, when 4 executives are providing customer support, again this the service is independent of one another. and the arrival of the calls, phone calls are also independent of one another. So again, it is having that first arrival follows Markov process, service also follows Markov process. There are 4 servers and there can be infinitely many calls. First one calling will get the first service. So it is first in, first out basis. And definitely the calling population is also infinite. Now, after looking into the basics of this queuing model or queuing system, let us just take up one example based on the most simple queuing model, which is known as the MM1 infinity FIFO infinity, or simply MM1 model or Erlang model. So this is actually a single server and infinite capacity queuing system. Now here we are assuming, we are making some assumptions. First of all, we assume that the arrival rate lambda is constant. Second, we assume that the service rate mu is also constant. And definitely the service rate must be greater than the rate of arrival. Otherwise, infinite queue will be formed. So lambda must always be less than mu in case of this infinite capacity queuing models to ensure that there is no infinite queue. Now the question, we are considering the situation that the patients are arriving at the government hospital for emergency service at the rate of 1 patient every hour. Currently, only 1 emergency case can be handled at a time, and patient spends on an average of 20 minutes receiving emergency care. Now the doctors wishes to have enough seats because since these are all emergency patients, so it is difficult for them to stand. So the doctors wishes to provide enough seats in the waiting room so that no more than about 1% of the arriving patients will have to stand. Now arbitrarily they cannot provide number of chairs or number of seats because as we increase the number of seats, we require more space. And so in this situation, first of all, we are going to find what is the probability that a patient arriving at the hospital will have to wait. Then we will study that what will be the average length of the queue that is formed. This is most important because we are considering that emergency patients. So emergency patients cannot wait always. So does he need to wait? So if there is a long queue, long wait, then we have to increase the servers. That means instead of handling 1 emergency case, we have to handle more than 1 emergency case. So what is the average length of the queue that is formed? Next, we are considering what is the average time the patient need to spend in the system. And what is the average time the patient needs to spend in the queue means what is the average time that the patient needs to wait before getting the service. Then next comes, so this is in the part of the patients or the customers. Now, again, what is the probability that there will be 5 or more patients waiting for the service? And what is the fraction of time that there is no patient? That means the emergency room is actually idle. No patient is there to serve. Then the average service time need to be decreased. So, since it is an emergency care, so definitely the hospital will try to reduce the waiting time of the patient. So waiting time, how can we reduce the waiting time? We cannot reduce the number of patients waiting because that is not in the hand of the hospital. How many patients are coming? So they can only reduce the number of, they can increase the number of servers for catering to more than one patient at a time, or they can reduce the service time, decrease the service time so that the patient need not wait longer in the queue. And then how many seats are to be provided so that not more than 1% of the patients has to wait. Now, first, we have seen that per hour, one patient is entering the hospital, emergency care of the hospital. So the arrival rate lambda is equal to 1 here. Also mentioned that the average service time for any patient is 20 minutes. That means in 1 hour, 3 patients can be served. So first, what is the probability that the patients arriving at the hospital will have to wait? The patient arriving at the hospital will have to wait means that the server is busy, the emergency service is already occupied. So that is given by the ratio of this lambda by mu. Lambda and mu, it is denoted by this letter rho, and it is actually the utility factor of the queue. It is known as the utility factor of the queue. Now here, after calculation, we see that this probability that the arriving patient have to wait is equal to 1 by 3. So we can represent it in another way, that out of 3 patients, only one patient has to wait. Now, what is the average length of the queue? So average length of the queue, how many patients are waiting in the queue before getting the service? So that is given by this LQ. So it is equal to 1 by 6. Now, what is the average time a patient spends in the system? So total time a patient is spending in the system is denoted by WS, and it turns out to be half an hour for this particular problem. Now looking for the next part is quite obvious from this calculation itself, because the average time the patient spends in the whole system means waiting in the before getting the service, and the service time, that is half an hour. Average service time is already given as 20 minutes. So the patient has to wait before getting the service is on an average 10 minutes only. 1 by 6 hours means 10 minutes only. Next is, what is the probability that there will be 5 or more patients waiting for the service? Because if 5 or more emergency patients are waiting for the service, then the hospital need to provide another server, another service facility, another emergency room. So what is the probability that there will be 5 or more patients waiting for the service? Fortunately, it turns out that this probability is very, very nominal. It is 0.0041. So it is very rare that 5 or more patients are actually waiting before getting the emergency service. Now, this is again a very important aspect of the queuing system in the part of the hospital, that what the fraction of time that there is no patient in the system, no patients waiting, no patients in the system, that means the system is idle, that emergency service is idle. So this is equal to 2 by 3 means that out in 1 hour, 40 minutes, the emergency service is actually idle. So definitely there is no question of increasing the number of server, because that only one particular server is also idle for most of the time. 2/3 of the time that server is idle. So how can we decrease the waiting time of the patient? As we mentioned that we can decrease the service time. Our average service time per patient, can we decrease this, or how much can we decrease? Because if we decrease this arbitrarily, then the quality of service will not be good. And we have to remember that we are dealing with emergency patients, so they need utmost care. Okay, so the average service time that need to be decreased to keep the average system less than average time in the system less than 25 minutes. So we need this new average service time such that this waiting time in the system is less than 25 minutes. And by calculation, after calculation, we see that it is okay if we just reduce it by say couple of minutes, and which is maybe more or less okay. Per patient, 2.35 minutes means 2 minutes on an average, around 2 minutes. If the service time is reduced, then the patient need not to wait more than 25 minutes in the system. Then when, as there are waiting patients and these are emergency patients, hospital need to provide the seats, and our condition is that no more than 1% of the arriving patients have to stand. That means 99% of the arriving patients must get a seat. So again, by calculation, we see that only 3 seats in this situation, only the 3 seats are enough to ensure that not more than 1% of the arriving patients will actually have to stand before getting the service, or even before getting a seat. So in conclusion, what we can say, that we have seen that waiting is inevitable. Whenever we are asking for any service, we have to wait. Now, there should be some optimization about with the waiting time and the server number of server provided. But first and foremost, as a customers, we have to be patient. Then we have to plan intelligently, and we have to have some extra additional time in hand whenever we are going for getting any service. Like, we know that there are some busy period in in every system. Like if we consider a bank, so might be in the first week of every month the bank has a heavy rush, but the remaining 3 weeks it does not have that much rush. So if my service, the required service, is not an emergency, I can uh, visit the bank in the from the second week of the month, second week onwards, and I can avoid the first week. So we have to plan it intelligently, and we have to maintain discipline. We cannot just ask for the priority service. Everyone cannot ask for priority service and make a chaos in the system. And if there is some emergency patients, emergency arrivals, or some elderly people or children arriving in the system, we have to respect their arrivals, and we have to uh, allow them to get the service first. So we have to respect others. And but this respect also works for the servers also, service providers also. There should be no compromise in the quality of service. Like in the previous problem, we cannot arbitrarily reduce the service time. That will definitely hamper the quality of service. So there should be no compromise with the quality of service. So if required, for reducing the waiting patients, waiting customers, the system has to increase the number of servers. So they have to be ready to invest more in customer comfort. And there should be a plan B ready, both in the part of the customers as well as the part of the server. Like if manual, if a machine is automated system is has some breakdown for some particular day, there should be some manual service which is readily available. So there should be some plan B. So these are the few books where we can get the basics of queuing theory. And that is all for my today's discussion. Thank you for patient hearing.